Hi all, this is Erica, aka ECR Horses 1901, and we're back for the 7th edition of tier ranking every traditional sized model. No. This is what happens when I don't actually write out the script for the beginning of the video. Okay, let's try that again. We are tier ranking every traditional sized Breyer model horse mold. And so, let's hop into it. We're picking up today with Farlap, introduced in 1985, sculpted by Chris Hess. The body is not a disaster, though it's far from great, but the face. As we've learned by now, faces are a struggle. They even did Teddy O'Connor dirty there, which sucks because he was a great eventing horse. This mold was last used in 2018 as a one-of-one Breyerfest live auction model with a, and I quote, chalky, warm, dapple gray coat that, in my opinion, actually looks good, and this sold for just $800, which was by far the lowest amount for any auction that year. That alone says a lot. D tier. Pluto, introduced in 1991, sculpted by Jeannie Mellon Herrick. I used to love the Lipizzaner as a kid, so this is another one I'm surprised I never got. Specifically this one on the screen, the original Pluto the Lipizzaner mold that was out from 1991 through 1995. He's definitely not a great mold, even in its most recent incarnations, the latest of which was from 2014 through 2017, when he was part of this set called Let's Go Riding English as a leopard Appaloosa of sorts. This mold was also used as a one-of-one Breyerfest live auction model 5 times, mostly in the 90s, but for the last time in 2004 as this Bay Overo. He's not great, so we're going D tier. Pony of the Americas, introduced in 1976, sculpted by Chris Hess. This mold exists as 2 different versions, the pre- and the post-2009 styles. Pre, we have a shorter mane and tail, and a more old-school head. An example of post is Kadinsky from the good old Just About Horses Connoisseur series in 2011. You can see a longer tail and mane, and a more refined head. The detail on the spots in this particular mold are also really nice, even more so than on some of the newer models that have been made on this mold. Pony of the Americas, C tier. Proud Arabian Foal, introduced in 1956, sculpted by Chris Hess from a design by Maureen Love. Look, he's not perfect, but I'm having a hard time being snarky about him. He's been around since literally forever, although Identifier Breyers notes that since 2009, Breyer has not had unlimited rights to both this mold and the Proud Arabian Mare, along with the classic racehorses and the G1 stablemates, all of which were originally Hagen-Renneker molds. And sure enough, there don't appear to have been any regular runs with this mold since 1999 through 2000's Black Arabian Foal. This mold has been a one-of-one Breyerfest live auction horse 9 times, almost always with the Proud Arabian Mare, although in 2004 he was paired with a Proud Arabian Stallion, and in 1995, I'm sorry it's minuscule, that's literally the best I could come up with, but in 1995 he was actually his own separate lot, and sold for $350, which was not bad for a selling price that year. Congrats to you, Proud Arabian Foal, because you get to be in A tier. Proud Arabian Mare, introduced in 1958, sculpted by Chris Hess, from a design by Maureen Love. Good old Pam. As with the Proud Arabian Foal, there's a bit of a story here. Again, according to Identifier Breyer, the old mold Proud Arabian Mare, aka Pam, which has no mold marks, was made by Breyer until 1959. Breyer stopped producing it at that time due to similarities to a mold made by Hagen-Renneker. When the mold was reintroduced in 1971 after negotiations with Hagen-Renneker, there were minor modifications, including a splayed front left leg and the addition of the round Breyer Molding Company and USA Mold stamps. The differences are truly not that noticeable, as in, I can't even show you two different models and have those changes be evident, so I won't. But she's another one of those molds. Pick your favorite horse coat color, pick a year, and you're bound to find a correlating Pam. Some of the more interesting models include, my apologies if I'm not pronouncing this correctly, Banat Ri, the Bay Going Gray from 2002, and Sierra Rose, a dappled rose gray who came in both matte and glossy versions as BreyerFest special runs in 2018. She has been a BreyerFest one-of-one horse either for live auctions, silent auctions, or as special prizes 19 times. Most recently was just in 2023, this lovely, chalky star dappled gray who sold for $10,000. She's a B tier, only because I don't love her conformation. Proud Arabian Stallion, introduced in 1971, sculpted by Chris Hess. I think it's interesting that this mold came so much later than the Proud Arabian Mare and Foal, but it did. He's not perfect, but he's not terrible, especially for a mold his age. I'm partial to Freedom, the Bloody Shoulder Arabian, because I love that marking, although I wish it had been done a little bit more realistically. This was a commemorative edition limited to 10,000 pieces back in 1997. He's been a one-of-one horse 14 times, mostly for the BreyerFest live auctions, but this solid blue denim model was made specifically for the Lone Star experience in 2009. As far as his auction models go, the most recent was this very lovely glossy liver chestnut in 2020, which sold for a respectable $8,000. Proud Arabian Stallion, A tier because he cleans up well. Quarter Horse Gelding, aka Quarter Horse, introduced in 1959, sculpted by Chris Hess. He's another chunky boy, very old school, and given this mold's age, that makes sense. Also, no surprise, this mold's been used for various stock horse breeds over the years, and is another name a horse coat color, he's probably had it. If I had to choose a favorite, I'd probably pick the most recent 2022 glossy Palomino quarter horse that's part of the Breyer Breeds collection. I mean, that is a lot of gloss. This isn't still a good mold by any means, but I can't hate on it. C tier. Quarter Horse Yearling, introduced in 1970, sculpted by Chris Hess. Let's ignore the tragic face for a moment, because we've got a story. So, Breyer held a Name the Yearling contest, which you can see the ad for down here at the bottom of the page, and they advertised this in 1970 for the original liver chestnut version of this mold that I just had on the screen. The first prize for this contest was a real-life horse. Like, no joke, it's tiny and I can't make it larger, I'm sorry, but if you can see that, it literally says right there, under first prize, a registered quarter horse yearling. Now, if I had been alive then, I know I would have wanted to enter this, but I'm sure my parents would have been like, oh, hell no. Anyway, the second place winner got a full set of tack, a saddle, bridle, and breastplate, and the third place winner got a pony-sized set of tack. Reportedly, they received over 40,000 entries, but the name they chose as the winner was this. It's not great in my opinion, but the name they chose was Miss Top Tonight. Second place was Breyer's Top Gal, and third was Roy's Prize Model. They also list a bunch of runner-ups here in this gray box. Again, this is all on Identifier Breyer for this mold, so if you want to take a closer look, I say come here and then you can read it. All the runner-ups won a copy of the model, and all I'm going to say is that overall the names weren't great and are extremely repetitive. Like, I don't know what was going on with kids in 1970, but creativity, anyone? Anyway, the mold itself is not very exciting, and a few interesting colors can't make up for its flaws. I'll only give it a few brownie points because of the cool story attached to it. D tier, but it's D-. Racehorse, introduced in 1954, sculpted by Chris Hess, based on a sculpture from Grand Wood Carving. This one is so old-timey, it's just fun. There is like zero detail on this horse, except for like in the mane and tail. He's a real smooth boy. They have done a few colors on him, some of which actually look nice, like Dixie, the glossy gray Pinto from 2014's Big Easy batch, limited to only 24. The last model made on this mold, believe it or not, was in 2018, a one-of-one Breyer Fest live auction. This glossy charcoal with white points, that sold for $2,500. Racehorse, we're gonna go C tier. Racking Saddlebred Stallion, aka Hamilton, introduced in 2019, sculpted by Jennifer Scott. Another gated mold that I quite like. All of the colors this mold come in are fantastic, although probably to no one's surprise, I'd have to say my favorite is glossy blue bronze decorator version of the Stagecoach Surprise model from Breyer Fest 2023. You really can't go wrong with any of these though. A tier, but in this case it's closer to an A+. Rain, introduced in 2002, sculpted by Kathleen Moody. Like Boomerang, this is another cartoony mold, in that Rain is part of Breyer's Spirit collection. None of the models on this mold have been terrible, they're just not my thing. But because this is my tier list, we're going D tier. Ranch Horse, aka Cody, American Ranch Horse, introduced in 1999, sculpted by C.M. Herden. Sorry this pic of Cody is so small, but again, that's all there is. There is something weirdly appealing about this mold, even though it's one of those situations where I don't find any of the particular models that great. I think my favorites, if I had to choose, would be the limited edition QVC Appaloosa from 2002, and also the Breyer Fest Glossy Palomino Volunteer model from 2008. I'll go C tier, but it's closer to C-. Romer, introduced in 1990, sculpted by Jeannie Mellon Herrick. Here we have the seemingly rare scenario in which I think Breyer made the head almost too refined. Shocking, I know. That's definitely usually not the case. Anyway, I had this model, I still do, and I adored him at the time. It's clear what Breyer was trying to do, trying to make a nice warm bloody model, but it was 1990 and it looks like a model from that era. So unfortunately, even some of the more recent models with nice coloring, like this Silver Bay from 2022, still suffer from the meh design. C tier, thanks to nostalgia. Roxy, introduced in 2009, sculpted by Susan Carlton Sifton. Another great stock horse mold. My favorites, if I had to choose, are Spot On, yet another Connoisseur Series horse from 2010. Really appreciate the Appaloosa specific details here. There's also Constellation, the Mid-States Distributing horse from 2012, a lovely roan, which I am a sucker for. And of course, and most unobtainably, the one-of-one Breyer Fest live auction Leopard Appaloosa model from 2020, which sold for $9,000, which I think is more than my real-life Appaloosa sold for in the year 1999. A tier. Roy the Belgian, introduced in 1989, sculpted by Francis Eustace. Yikes. This mold is not a chunk, but a tank. Despite its lack of nuance, this mold has been used pretty consistently over the years, including a one-of-one for the 2023 Breyer Fest live auction. Granted, the coloring is nice here, but I would not have spent $14,000 on this guy. Sorry, but no, absolutely not. There are such better draft molds produced by Breyer now. Why they keep this awkward boy around, I really don't know. F tier. Ruffian, introduced in 2006, sculpted by Susan Carlton Sifton. This is a really cool mold to commemorate the famous racehorse, and which has been used to portray several famous racehorses since, including Rachel Alexandra and American Pharoah. It's nice, but there are honestly very few models on this mold that I would consider going for. Also, I'm sorry, but Padma is a straight up abomination. I said what I said. B tier, but it's more like B-. Rugged Lark, introduced in 1989, sculpted by Pam Tally Stoneburner. Rugged Lark was another model I had to have when I was a kid, and I still like this mold overall. Does it have its problems? Yes. But I also think it has a lot of eye appeal. I'm actually a little surprised that this mold has not been used since 2008, when he was turned into Patch, one of the Saddle Club horses, and came in this set, which included the book Horse Sense, which I know I read at some point way earlier in my life. He was the Breyer Fest live auction horse several times during the 90s, but unfortunately Identifier Breyer only has pictures of about half those models, such as this Black Pinto from 1997. And it's too bad that there aren't more pictures, because I would love to see what the Strawberry Roan looked like on this guy. Rugged Lark, A tier. Running Foal, introduced in 1963, sculpted by Chris Hess. This is another old school goober. Let's take a moment to look at his little alien head. This mold hasn't always been so cursed though, and some of the models using it are actually nice to look at. For example, we've got Footloose from 2004 to 2008, a nice bay, and the foal from the Mustang Stallion and Foal Legacy 3 gift set, which was a Sears holiday catalog special from the year 2000. Still a few cursed models though, like this guy from 1983. This is another mold that was used sometimes singly and sometimes with the running mare on a variety of lamps during the 1960s. I'm feeling generous, B tier. Running Mare, introduced in 1961, sculpted by Chris Hess. I don't get flockies, and that eye is terrifying. Just felt like throwing that one out there to start with. I don't have a lot to say about the Running Mare mold. I figured I'd put a more normal looking one up. I'm sure she was a childhood favorite for a lot of people, but it's also an older mold, so it's going to have some of those older mold issues. Pretty sure my favorite of the batch is the Glossy Bay Tobiano Robin, who is part of Breyer's Birds of a Feather series in 2022. C tier. And that brings us to the last mold for today, Running Stallion, introduced in 1968, sculpted by Chris Hess. Man, are heads a challenge. I have Rumbling Thunder, the 1993 to 1994 model using this mold, and I actually chose not to show him in breed at the recent Scratch and Dent show I've talked about in previous videos, because I literally could not pick a breed for him. The Running Foal and Mare feel like Arabians, whereas this guy feels more like a thoroughbred, maybe, but the body is just so thick that I couldn't even spring for that, not even at a show for older models. I don't think this is a great mold, but there are a few models where he doesn't look as cursed. For example, the 2002 QVC Year of the Horse model, Jade, actually looks good because realism is not the point. I also like the various Sailor models from the 2015 Vintage Club. Pretty much any of the colors there are nice. So yeah, I can't go any higher than D tier. Alright, let's look at those tiers. We did not have any changes to S tier this week, so still at 9. We now have 29 in A tier though, up from 24. We have 23 in B tier, up from 20. In C tier, we now have 38, up from 32. There's 21 in D tier, up from 16. And we only had one addition in F tier, poor Roy, for a total of 13. We now have 3 more videos to go when it comes to ranking all the traditional size molds. Then I think I'm going to do a reflection video because I can say that when I go through and add to this actual tier chart each week, there are a few models whose ranking I no longer agree with. So I'll definitely be doing some kind of wrap-up video when we get to the end of the traditional molds. After that, we will see. I do plan on tier ranking the classic sized and the stablemate molds. I want to say probably not the mini winnies, but I don't want to rule out anything. I know somebody asked in the comments if I was going to do that, and yeah, I don't know. I will just kind of give you a spoiler alert, I guess, and say that my opinion on the mini winnies doesn't tend to be great. So I'm really not sure what a tier ranking of them would look like. I guess it could be interesting. I don't really know yet. Yeah, I'm guessing though that once we finish the traditionals, even though I definitely plan on doing the classics and the stablemates, I probably am not going to jump directly back into tier ranking videos after we finish this. So that's kind of some info on the plan going forward. If you have any ideas for a video that you'd be interested in seeing me do, please feel free to leave it in the comments. And as always, also feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.